It is a pleasure, and I think many would say a miracle, that we are about to hear a powerful story from the Henry family in Indiana as David and Michele join us to tell the story of faith over fear and David's COVID 19 survival miracle. And I don't use that phrase haphazardly, I don't throw it around. But as you'll learn in the moments ahead, that's really what's happened in the life of this man and this family. And every week on The Big Impact, we invite our listeners to send us story ideas. And lo and behold, from out of nowhere in the middle of Indiana, and when I say old high school classmate, I mean old high school classmate by the name of Wes Munsell reached out and said, "You need to tell the story of David and Michele." So, first, Wes, it's good to see you, man. I have less hair than the last time we were in the same room together. You look about the same.
Yeah, I think I do. My hairdresser says that if I have that much hair when I'm 70, I'll be in good shape. But it's good to see you, Bill.
Yeah, rub it in, will you? That's fantastic. Thanks so much. Well, Wes, I wanted to bring you on at the beginning of this conversation to let you kind of lay the groundwork for why this story touched you like it has and why you think it'll be an encouragement to our listeners, our audience.
Well, first off, Bill, how many people can say that they have actually seen a miracle? I mean, we use that word miracle in a lot of different ways these days, but I'm talking about a miracle where God steps into a situation, changes the situation, and does just absolutely what nobody on earth could ever imagine was going to happen. And that's the story that we've got. And so I've been kind of keeping you up to date as Dave was going through. Michele would post on Facebook, and been keeping you up to date in the asking for prayer, and I appreciate that you've done that. But hey, our prayers were answered. We're seeing a miracle, and they're with us today.
Well, and throughout the journey, and we don't want to do any spoilers, but
Yeah.
throughout the journey of David and Michele, there were a lot of people following what was happening and being part of a prayer group that really was lifting up this family. And Wes, I know that you were an active part of that. So let me just ask you this: what's it like now as we sit here on a Zoom call, recording audio and video at the same time, for you to look and see your friends looking pretty good?
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to this Sunday getting to see them at church physically. Our church is going to be opening up the doors,
Oh,
and I'm looking forward to seeing them Sunday morning.
Yeah.
well, I sure appreciate you kind of cluing us into the story, Wes. And it's a real invitation that we give to our audience. When you know of something inspiring, we want to hear about it. And that's exactly what Wes did. He's been one of our most faithful listeners and supporters. So thank you, man. It's good to see you.
Great to see you, Bill.
All right, now go get that trumpet out and start practicing again. We've got a concert coming up.
Yeah, there we go.
Thanks, man. That's Wes Munsell in Indiana, and it was because of Wes's guidance that we are having the chance now to meet David and Michele. And for the two of you, I said that it's really a pretty cool pleasure to meet you virtually like this, and that it's both a surprise and a miracle. Michele, how surprised are you to have this opportunity?
Well, it's been an amazing, just the whole thing has been just a surprise. Some of the surprises were really bad and some were really good. But yeah, if you had asked me 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, I wouldn't have had certainty that my husband would be with me today. So yeah, let alone talking on a radio show.
Okay, so here we are talking in the middle of May, and just a short time ago, I think March 26th is the date that will live in infamy in the Henry family.
Absolutely.
Lay out for us what happened. And David, I'd love to hear your perspective. I'm gathering you don't remember a lot of it.
I remember March 26th, I was running a high fever, and I had been fighting my way back from pneumonia. And I remember we couldn't get my fever below 103. And I thought, I have COVID. I have COVID-19. And we went to the hospital confident. I just knew in my bones. And I remember having to say goodbye to my wife and not kiss her goodbye because I was afraid that I was contagious. And
So you remember that part. You still have that part fresh in your mind.
I do.
And we hear stories throughout this pandemic of families and couples not being able to physically be near each other at a time of crisis. And because whether we're going in for a quick outpatient procedure or something serious, everybody wants to have that kiss on the forehead and the I love you before they put you into the twilight zone. And to not have that, I would think would add an extra level of anxiety on both sides.
Yeah.
So David's going in, and Michele, what's your thought at that moment?
I really thought, David's been fairly healthy. Like, we've not had that many issues of any real concern over the years. And so I figured, okay, 2 weeks, we can do this. And I had no idea how long it was going to be, but that was what I was thinking. I knew the quarantine period is 14 days at that point, so I figured, he'd be in and out in 2 weeks, give or take a couple of days. But that wasn't even the beginning.
Well, it's so hard to know at that moment when it's the gurney, it's the processing of paperwork, it's all of those kind of elemental aspects of a hospital visit that you think are routine, and who can tell at that moment that it's going to result in a whole lot more than that. How far into this day on the 26th of March did either of you start to think this isn't going well?
The 26th was, we didn't even go to the hospital till later in the evening. So I think it was maybe 10:30 in the evening when he finally was taken up. So I feel like on the 26th, at least for me, I didn't sense this was going to be that serious. I thought he'd get in, he'd get some extra oxygen, they do their thing, and he'll be waiting a period, and then he'll come home. So on that day, there wasn't a lot of fear, really. I mean, I was concerned, and it was weird being in the hospital. Everybody acts so, if I felt like I was in a movie like E.T. or something, where everyone's all suited up and you feel like the big bubble thing and all the, the filter sucking all the air out of every room. And it was pretty intense, like, as far as that went. But I thought, yeah, God's got this. This is little. This will get us a couple weeks and we'll be done.
So you're entering into this hazmat suit environment that looks like, as you said, a scene out of a movie. And for Michele, that had to be quite jarring. But for David, as you're on the, what I would call the horizontal end of all of this, looking up at the faces looking down at you, can you take us inside of your mindset at that time? Was there a pretty big fear factor in the early stages?
I had, I posted on Facebook, choosing faith over fear. Please pray for me as I'm admitted to Marion General Hospital. And I was making a cognitive, intentional decision to not be afraid, to be prayerful. I wouldn't say I was completely at peace, but I had no idea. I really thought, I'm going to be here 2 weeks, or I'll be here shortly and I'll come home for a 2-week isolation period. I felt a little bit like E.T. in the movie, and I felt a lot of concern that the word that I felt was toxic. that I was toxic to other people.
Hmm.
As a people person, as a hugger, and I'm a teacher. We have 11 children, and we're involved in our church, and we're involved in our neighborhood. I was thinking about all the people I've been in contact with, and I was uncomfortable with the idea that the healthcare staff had to care for me, knowing that I carried a contagious virus.
David, sometimes in the connection for interviews via Zoom, the quality of the internet can come and go a little bit. And so I'm sure that I heard incorrectly when you said you have 11 children.
I know. I told the Lord that didn't sound right either. But we have 3 biological children, and then we adopted, and we have guardianship of the rest. And that was our missional call. Sometimes God sends people to be missionaries out, and God sent our mission field to us. So we have 11 children, and with different levels of ability and needs. So our life was already moderately complicated.
Moderately complicated, yes.
Yeah, we're used to it now.
Well, let me just interrupt and say that as someone who at 3 weeks old was adopted, I hold the highest regard for the commitment that you've made to care for those children. And the story is just getting started, friends, as we're visiting with David and Michele Henry to hear about David's COVID-19 miracle. We'll continue the conversation in just a moment here on The Big Impact. David and Michele Henry are the parents of 11. They have an already adventurous life. There are very few moments of quiet and calm and peace. And then you add to it what happened back in March, April, and into May. And this story is a powerful one. In the prior moments, Michele, we were talking about how that realization began to kick in, that this was not just going to be a quick cure, a nebulizer, and some meds to get David past pneumonia, but that we were dealing with a pretty severe case of COVID-19. Do you recall when someone, a doctor, nurse, came to you and gave you that diagnosis?
The COVID diagnosis?
Yeah.
Or well, they actually told him. I was not able to be with him because there aren't any visitors at the hospital at the moment. So they told him, and he sent me a text. And his texts were very broken. Like I could tell he was struggling to stay awake or to control his hands. But he told me he did have COVID after, because the test took a day or so to get back after the reading of it. So we knew he went in on the 26th. We knew probably the 27th that he had it for sure. And then his texts to me were very short, and there might be 2 hours between them. Like he would phase in and out, I think, of sleeping or whatever. And so I could tell that it was a little worse than we thought. And then on the 28th, then the doctor called me and said they had to put him on a ventilator, and I had to get consent for that. And when that happened, I was like, okay, this is a lot more serious than we thought. And I'm going to need a lot more prayer support.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
How about the care of a sizable family? Because now you're basically at home by yourself. David's being treated, and you still have 11 children there to care for. Did others come in to help be a part of that effort?
Well, of course, nobody could come in because we were on strict quarantine ourselves.
Your home was also on quarantine?
Yeah, because since he had it,
Yeah.
or at first was suspected initially, we were quarantined from that point on. And our county was already pretty strict about quarantining things already. So no one could actually come in. In fact, my parents are in their 80s and live next door. And it was the hardest thing in the world to turn my mom away. Every day she wanted to come and be with me and check on me. And I had to make her leave. And that was really, really hard. Because I knew, I know a mom's heart, and she wanted to be there. And I didn't want to risk getting her sick. I was pretty confident I had it as well at that point, and I couldn't risk losing my husband and my parents. And so I wouldn't come to the door even. My kids, I sent my kids to tell their grandparents to go back home. And that was very, very hard.
Yeah, I can't imagine all of those emotions that are rolled into that. I mean, I can see that it still is touching your heart in a powerful way.
Yeah.
Because you tell me if I have this anywhere close to correct, Michele, but here you are surrounded by young people, but feeling alone at the same time.
Yeah, it was weird. Yeah, it was really weird, especially right away when not a ton of people knew yet. Our church family knew, the ones that were closer to us. I had reached out to them and told them. And so there was already like a prayer effort, and people were starting to send us meals. We had supper every single day, the entire month of April brought to our house. And people would just bring it and set it on the porch. And so we were very, very well taken care of, as much as people could do. But I kept hearing from people time and time again, I just want to come and hug you. I just want to be there. And I knew their hearts were with us, but it was hard to just not have that. My older kids were like rocks to me. And that was so helpful. We have older kids that are in college, and they were constantly hugging on me and saying, "Good job, Mom, you're doing it." And I needed that.
Understandably. Yeah, understandably. And are you then receiving from the hospital any updates from anybody? Because at some point through this, I know David's ability to communicate is pretty much shut down, right? Is it gone? How soon into your stay, David, did you kind of shut down?
28.
Yeah. 28. I have memories that came in the morning during his rounds, and he introduced himself, and he said, "David, I want to be your prayer partner while you're here, and we're just going to pray together every day that God's going to help you through this." And that's the last memory I have, and I didn't wake up again until April.
This is your doctor that's saying that?
Oops. I think we lost you.
Hello? Do you have me now?
Oh, there you are. Okay.
David, is it your doctor that is saying that about coming in to pray with you?
Yes. It was a huge blessing. I had no idea that my doctor was going to be a believer, but it was a great comfort to pray with your doctor and know that the person that's looking after your body is talking to the person that cares for your soul.
That's a great way to put it.
I'll never, I think the reason I remember that is because it was so impactful for me.
Well, at some point...
but my health immediately declined.
I was going to say, at some point in this period of time, you went downhill rapidly and had to go for a little ride to another hospital. So you get transferred over to the Lutheran Hospital in Fort Wayne, I believe. Do you know? Do you remember that, David, or being told of that, or were you just out?
I was out.
Yeah.
I have memories from while I was out, but they're not what was actually happening to me. They're one of the things that happens with the amount of sedation I had. as well as the COVID, is bizarre dreams, hallucinations, or visions. And so I have things that my mind experienced that my body didn't.
That first miracle, though, that happened was him getting to transfer. Before he starts talking about Lutheran, I want to put that in there because the hospital was trying to transfer him because there's this particular kind of rotating bed that would have been especially good for him, for his lungs, because if they could sleep on their stomach, then that relieved some of the pressure off of his lungs and they could rest better at night. And our hospital doesn't have those yet. And so they were trying to transfer him, and Lutheran Hospital turned him down initially because he was too sick and would not have survived the transfer.
Oh,
and
I didn't realize that he was already at that point where moving him could kill him.
Right. Yeah. So that was the biggest, that was the first big miracle that happened for us, was just the fact that he had this one brief, it was not even a whole day, but a half a day where he improved just enough where Lutheran was willing to take a risk on him. And so that was the 31st, I think, of March, maybe the 30th. I can't remember.
Michele, was that the first time that you were presented with the possibility that David might not make it?
Yeah, I actually didn't know until after he was already in Lutheran why we were denied that first request. So I just knew that there was this certain number, and I don't even remember what it was now, but there was this certain thing that had to improve before Lutheran would take him. And I sent to my friends, and we got to get him up there. Please pray for a miracle. And so then that day or the next morning, they said that they would take him. So I still though didn't understand the gravity of the situation, I think, that we were in. I learned later that the reason they turned him down was because he wouldn't have survived. I didn't know that initially.
Well, so the transfer takes place on the 30th, and I was reading a newspaper account of your story, and you said that on April 1st, they told you he was not going to survive this, and it was pretty hopeless at that point. I can't imagine what was going through your mind and your heart at that time. What was that announcement or that bit of information like for you?
Yeah, it was obviously extremely disheartening, because here we had this little victory that he could transfer, and then immediately he came crashing down, and to the point where they said there's just nothing else that we can do, and you guys need to prepare yourselves for him not to make it. And so I had to have that conversation with our children, and anytime the phone would ring and it was a Fort Wayne number, I would go to the stairway, and I was sitting in the stairway crying, and some of my kids came, and then we just sat there, and I told them, guys, we have to prepare ourselves for the fact that Dad might not make it through this, and that's not a reflection of our faith not being big enough. It just means that God's going to do something different, and we just don't know what that's going to be, but somehow God's going to help us through this, and I don't know what. And, we just cried and held each other, and it was sweet and awful at the same time.
There aren't very many mothers listening to our conversation who can fathom being in that position with one child, let alone 11 of them, each of whom have their own unique needs for hearing these things and the ways that they would process things, and just all these variables that come into play here. And after you shared that with everybody, and you had your time of tears and hugs and just kind of maybe just coming to grips with what could very well be facing you.
Yeah.
Is this the time when, as we like to say, the troops were rallied to begin
Yeah.
praying in earnest for
Yeah,
David?
that's absolutely what happened. I don't even know why. My husband and I have always been a fairly transparent kind of people, I guess. But also there are those things you just hold close that you don't share with everybody, like inner struggles and things. But you have your inner circle, and those inner circle people already knew how bad things were. But David has been a teacher for 24 years, and I've been a teacher and now a pastor for the same amount of time. And so there were a lot of people that had felt very invested in our family over the years. And I knew that there would be some more people that would care enough to pray for us. And my phone had kind of been blowing up off and on already. And I didn't have the energy to answer all the texts and Facebook messages and all that. So I just put out a plea and I said, the news is not good. Please pray for a miracle. And when I did that, like immediately hundreds of people responded, and I just couldn't believe how many people cared that much. And it just grew like out of control almost. But it was, it just kind of became sort of a daily thing for me to share, not the gritty details because that was too much, but just a little update every day on how he was doing, because everybody wanted to know he was getting better. And there were days he was and days he wasn't. It was just really, really long, but it was amazing to see and to sense all of the prayers and the support that we were getting. It was incredible.
We are enjoying the conversation, the story, the powerful story of faith over fear, the Henry family in Indiana, David and Michele. And after essentially being told that her husband was not ever coming home, here's a bit of a spoiler alert. Since if you're watching our video stream, David's sitting on the couch. This is not Weekend at Bernie's. He's actually there sitting next to Michele, and it's a tribute to the power of prayer. And I know that as I say that, David and Michele, that there are a number of our listeners and our viewers who can appreciate what we're talking about. They get it, that there's an unexplainable, incredible power behind praying to the Lord for healing. Now, it's not an automatic. It's not like putting a quarter in the jukebox. Sometimes his answer can be no. And we have to trust that he is the creator and the master script writer. And thankfully, in this case, his answer was, yeah, David, we're going to keep you around for a while. We want you to be here for a longer time. Why do you think that is, David?
I absolutely believe that God has work for me to do. While my body was going through all these things, my kidneys shut down. I was on dialysis. My lungs weren't functioning. But somehow at the same time, my mind was at peace. And during that time where my body was shutting down, my spirit was very much present with the Lord. And I didn't see Jesus or have any of those, bright light experiences that you hear about and wonder if they're making up. But what I did experience was a very intimate time of extended prayer where I went through and prayed person by person over my family. And one of the things I told the Lord, for us to adopted or taken in these kids, those kids have to experience a substantial loss. And our kids have had to grieve things that kids shouldn't have to grieve. And I went through and prayed over each of our kids and prayed that whatever God chose, he would protect their hearts, that they might still know him. But I asked him, I said, Lord, I don't know how my children's faith will manage if they have another loss. And I don't know how Michele will manage this family. And so I asked him to spare me for my kids' sake. And, you know, as our kids are getting older and some of them are dating people we think they're going to marry, and one of our daughters is engaged, and I'm like, Lord, I want to be there for this part of my life. I want to enjoy that. And if you would allow it, I will promise to say yes to however you want to use this. And I felt really strongly impressed on my heart that I was to proclaim that my name is David Henry and I am a child of the one true God. And I told the Lord, if you bring me through this, I promise that'll be my message. And he did. And go ahead.
I'm wondering during this recovery time, when you came out of the fog, like when did you start to remember things that were real instead of the hallucinations? And do you recall kind of the, I guess for lack of a better word, the re-entry process into reality?
I do. I don't remember all of it because they did it in stair-stepped increments.
Easter was the first day
Yep.
that they removed enough sedation that he was awake.
And
He didn't know at the time it was Easter, but we all knew.
Yeah.
I remember opening my eyes to a nurse looking over me, and she said, "You're at the Lutheran Hospital in Fort Wayne. Do you remember your name?" And I tried to say, "My name is David Henry, and I'm a child of the one true God." But I wasn't able, because I didn't realize at that time that I still had tubes down my throat, and so I wasn't able to speak, but I could nod my head. And I remember later on, they had a communication board with all these letters on it, and I was trying to spell out David Henry, child of the one true God. But because of the condition of my physical body, I couldn't maneuver my hand well enough. So it took me over a week of being alert, in my right mind, and strapped to the bed while intubated. And before I could actually remove the tubes, they took those tubes out, and I coughed out, "I'm David Henry, and I'm a child of the one true God." And they went, "What?" I said, "I'm David Henry, and I'm a child of the one true God." And they went, "Okay."
Well, that's fantastic. And Michele, at some point, you got to actually see the guy. I don't know if it's happened yet or when they gave you the green light, but I can't imagine how cool that reunion must have been.
Yeah, we got to see some pictures and videos. The nurses would text me different times, like when they were starting to wake him up more, the nurses would send me pictures and images. And then eventually, once he was able to talk and think, well, no, even before he could talk, we would do FaceTime with the kids, and he could hear us and he could nod and respond. And the first few times it was pretty hard because he looked really bad. But I had to keep telling myself, this is better. This is actually better. The stuff they wouldn't show us was probably the stuff that was really bad. So we we kept encouraging each other that Dad is looking better today than yesterday, and this and that. Then when they were finally able to take the tube out, then it became a matter of when he's coming home. It was not really ever when up until that point. It was always if. So when we got the word that he for sure will come home, it's just a matter of when, that was like, okay, we can do this. I don't care if he's stuck in rehab for 6 more weeks, he's coming home. Because that was not an assurance at any point up until then. They kept saying, intubation is not ever supposed to be more than 2 weeks, and he had been in there 28 days with that. Dialysis was not supposed to be as long as he had dialysis. He was going to suffer long-term damage. All these things, all the sedation for that length of time was supposed to have done damage to his brain and caused psychiatric problems. And he's no worse than he was before.
No noticeable difference.
I thought, I think I'm even funnier than before. But she doesn't find that to be the case.
Oh, man. And David, the picture of you coming out, and it's also the picture we're using on the podcast image, but it's the picture of you with arms raised and what has to feel like victory as you emerge from that hospital. Can you, as we close things out here, can you describe what that's like?
It was overwhelming. I had received such outstanding care. I had received so much attention. I didn't understand. I didn't process what I had been through, and I didn't process how many thousands of people had hit their knees on my behalf. And it was at that moment, they wheeled me out of the hospital in what was called a warrior walk. And the hospital staff lined the hallways, and they took me out into the foyer, and it's a 2-story foyer, and there were people lining the balcony and lining the room I was in, cheering and hooting and clapping and hollering for me because of what God had done in my life. And all I wanted to do was scream, hallelujah, praise the Lord, thank you, Jesus. Now, as you can hear, my voice is still in recovery mode from all of the days with the tube in. So at that point, I couldn't go above a whisper. But so the best I could do was lift my hands in victory so that they knew that that's what I could do. I point to the Lord, and that's what I could do to give him thanks so that everybody knew that all glory went to God for what he had done in my life. There's nothing I could have done to deserve the favor that God gave me. It's just the grace of God as a result of his faithful people praying. And my life is forever changed by that. It's so humbling to walk out into that environment and to see that amount of support and to learn that community members have rallied around your family, literally, physically circling your home in prayer. Mm-hmm. Literally, we had a couple that brought their family every day to the parking lot of the hospital in Fort Wayne and prayed for me. Wow. We had people praying in the hospital here because nobody had access to me. So they literally formed rings of prayer around the buildings I was in. What an example of the body of Christ. This is how we believers are supposed to look. And it's amazing to be the recipient of that. The Saturday after I got home, my school corporation had a fire truck parade for me, and they drove me through the communities where hundreds of people lined the streets wearing T-shirts they bought as a fundraiser to support us that said faith over fear. And I still can't process that this is my life. How did an ordinary guy doing the little things that God called him to do warrant this kind of support? How has God used our family to reach this many people? It's mind-boggling and humbling. And it's, for us, it's life-changing, because I will never buy into the lie that I don't matter. And as believers, we put through our life trying to be obedient. And many times you can get discouraged and you can think, what is this all for? Well, because of this near-death experience and then the prayer that happened as a result, my kidneys are fine, my lung is fine, my blood pressure is better than it was when I went in. I've got a couple scars, and I've got a weak voice that will return to full strength. What a miracle God has wrought, and I will never again buy into the lie that what we do goes unnoticed or doesn't matter.
Yeah, what a wonderful perspective, and a great way to wrap up our conversation. Now, Michele, of course, is a children's pastor at the church, and she's also a children's pastor in a home of 11. So I'm impressed by so many levels of your story, but perhaps at the top it needs to be that the fact that for the last hour we've had a conversation and no children have run into the room. I don't know how you pulled that off. How'd you do it?
I got a whip. No, no, they keep peeking their faces. We have French doors in the room we're in, and they keep peeking their faces in to ask me questions, and I'm going.
Okay, so as we're wrapping up our conversation here, bring them all in the room.
Oh.
Put them all, have them gang pile on the couch here. I want to see this.
I don't have everybody.
Yeah, as many of them as you can. Get the whole softball team in here.
We'll back up. We'll have to have a wider.
Gotta go back. Gotta go wide a little bit here. This is fantastic.
Our older ones are doing college work, but we've got some of them here.
We've got a good number of people that are watching us live right now on our Facebook stream, and I think they would love to see the family all together in here. All right. There's a couple of them.
Let me see your board.
You guys.
We got them.
All right.
There's another. You want me to see your back? That's me. I guess this is only. Oh.
Yeah.
Isaiah in the kitchen.
Isaiah, come here.
I love it.
Several of them are doing their online.
Oh, the dog came. How about that?
They're leaning on you.
You can never leave the dog out of the shot. That's the mandatory inclusion. I love it. Well, hey, on behalf of everybody who's been praying for your whole family, we're so thrilled that you're all back together, that Dad's feeling pretty good and recovering. And you guys were great during the last hour as we were communicating on here. I never even knew you were in the house. I thought you were all out somewhere. And I know we've only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6. So there's still the other half of the football team is in the other room, but they'll all come.
They're trickling in. Here's another one.
Good. Let's see.
Hi.
Peeking his head in from the side. And who all was doing homework that just got interrupted? You were? Oh, nice. So you're happy to kind of sit here for the next hour or two if that's what it requires, right?
They don't mind a distraction.
Nice. It's an awesome family photo. You are blessed. I'm so glad that Wes introduced me to all of you, and what a powerful testimony to the incredible impact that prayer can make. So thank you so much for sharing your story. We are blessed for it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We're happy to be here. Like literally happy to be here.